that you have to be the parent to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't learn that till I had my daughter. So, but the same sort of thing with teaching. You're not the teacher until the kids present you with the opportunity to be that kind of person, that kind of teacher that you're going to end up being. You know, so
that's kind of deep. That whole teacher, like you're not a teacher until you have a student, right? Would that be the way of until you have a student that wants to learn?
Yeah, but it's also that particular student that's going to create the dynamic that you're going to be interacting with as the teacher. So you can say, I can teach, but until you're faced with the person themselves that needs to learn, and to approach that relationship correctly, I think they're as much a teacher to you as you are to them, because you have to take them where they're at, just like they take you where you're at. And it's that interaction between the two that creates, and as long as you have a positive outlook on it, you'll create a positive dynamic that ultimately, I think, leads to something beneficial and positive for everybody. And I think it was demonstrated by the outcome, you know.
Yeah, you guys were 10-0, right?
Well, that just in the volleyball, yeah, but in the classroom as well, you know. I mean, there were days, like, for example, we would have testing. So instead of doing the typical boring teacher stuff, I would go to the library, I'd rec out a TV, and I would have someone bring in their PlayStation 2, and I would bring in my guitar, and they would bring in their guitar, and we'd play Guitar Hero.
Oh, yeah?
So I became known as the Guitar Hero teacher because that's what we like to do. But, I mean, there's times that you can play and there's times that you have to work. And I think to give the space of play and not seriousness in a classroom gives you the opportunity when the time comes to be serious, to actually then expect that work because you're giving them the perk. So they see that, okay, well, if I'm going to be able to goof around a little bit, I have to perform. And then, of course, couple that with the respect that you create in that sort of mutual interaction, it was positive all around. And the interesting thing, too, was when I completed that first year of probation as a teacher, your first year is always probationary, all the other teachers decided they didn't want to work at Ingleside anymore. So I ended up becoming the head teacher. And I got to pick what grade I wanted to teach. So I said sophomore. So I ended up following up. So halfway through the year, I ended up getting those freshmen. And I ended up getting freshman girls, volleyball girls in my class. So the second year, I decided I wanted to teach them again. So I chose sophomore. So, well, the same thing happened the third year where everybody decided to leave. And they asked me what I wanted to teach, and I said juniors. So for 3 years, I ended up teaching the same group of kids. And there's a risk in that, because if I was a horrible teacher, then I'm destroying these kids. You know?
Right.
Why do I keep getting stuck with this guy?
But yeah, they call me their Mr. Feeney, because I kind of followed them up through, you know. And if we hadn't have come back their junior year to Seattle, I would have
Probably done
gone
senior.
up to their seniors,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So.
Well, I bet you probably keep in touch with some of them still.
Oh yeah, they're all Facebook friends for
Awesome.
sure. Yeah.
So back to you being the Guitar Hero teacher, right? I think for anybody in life, like if you're always hard-nosed, you know, always paying attention to detail, there's no fun, there's no joking, no relaxation, none of that. Eventually that gets old, and you know, it could drive you crazy. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I've had a boss before that was, you always have to be on point. There's no joking around. Everything has to be taken seriously. And eventually it gets to you to a point where you're worn down so much that you're not going to perform as well. You're not going to take in the information that they're trying to teach you, because all you can think about is this is always, it's almost painful. You know, I feel like a slave, or I feel like you know, you're forcing me to do something over and over again with no fun and no joy.
Yeah.
You find that balance, and you get somebody to learn a lot more. I'm sure that was your experience.
Oh,
I don't
for sure.
know.
Yeah, well, I was told multiple times that, you know, you're getting more work out of us than we give any teacher. And kids that were notoriously difficult for other teachers, I never had a problem, not once. And again, it was because I never treated them like they were children or students or less than. It was always, look, we all have work to do. You're in this class. We have a goal. We're going to get it done. But when we do get it done, we're going to reap a benefit and have some fun and relax. Because isn't that what life is?
Yeah.
I mean, like you say, you're not working all the time. You're going on trips. You're doing stuff on the weekends. You're rebuilding engines. You're doing whatever the heck it is you're doing. It's never 100%. And any situation in the school that I saw, like I had a teacher that was in the room next to me. All day long, I heard yelling and screaming and yelling and screaming, and the kids hated the class, and she hated the kids, and it was just awful dynamic. But 95% of it came from the teacher and how she was treating the kids and how she perceived them as being in her classroom, which was less than, which was stupid kids, which was rude teenagers, obnoxious teenagers, all that bullshit. Let all that go, just deal with them as people, and they respond. And I had 3 years of great success as a result.
Well, the teachers that I had in high school that showed me no respect and treated me as less, I treated them as less.
Well, isn't that the natural disposition of people? If you're going to be treated like an asshole, sure, okay. If you're going to treat me like an asshole, I'm going to be an asshole. Right. I mean, that's just what we do.
And I'm not going to respect anything that you say, whether it has value to it or not.
Which is ultimately destroying any potential learning that either one could be doing, whether it's the teacher or the student. Yeah, because every situation is a learning experience, if we choose to see it that way.
100%.
So.
You brought a beer today, so let's hear about the beer you brought today.
The beer I brought, and I specifically chose it because I thought we'd talk about it, was Pyramid Hefeweizen, and I love the Hefeweizen. When I was in the Army after NSA, I was stationed in Germany, and it was the first beer that I was introduced to there. And now I remember why I was talking about the wine earlier. I knew a person in Maryland who owned a vineyard, and we would go up there and bottle wine. And one of the best parts of that bottling process was the fact that the wine was unfiltered. So you got the full flavor of the barrel and the wine, and the Hefeweizen's kind of like that for me, where you get a sense of sort of, not so much like a Guinness where it's thick, but you get there's a meatiness to the beer. Whereas, say, more of a domestic is, I don't want to call it watery. It serves its purpose for sure, but a Hefeweizen just has a real full flavor to me.
Right, it's not super filtered.
Yeah, and I like that. So
yeah,
to me,
you got that flavor to it.
I like the wheat beer.
So, Eric, do you usually drink craft beer then?
If I drink a beer, I usually go for a Hefeweizen, or I like Red Hook ISB.
Oh yeah, Red Hook ISB is good.
I
like their IPA. Red Hook's good. All right, so I wanted to get back into you did paramedics for a while. You were a paramedic.
2 years.
You were a driver, passenger?
Student, actually, and I would ride out. So part of the program was that you would hook up with a fire department station in the city. So the one that I picked was generally Station 10. Station 10 had the 4th highest call volume in the United States, not just in Texas, but in the U.S. So I always thought that was a pretty crazy statistic. Considering
you've seen some shit then.
4th highest.
I mean, New York, Chicago, L.A., all those big cities, this is the 4th highest. But honestly, South Texas is notorious for diabetes and heart attacks, so that's pretty much what we saw.
Ooh.
Too much good food.
So, yeah, my range of experiences in EMT was everything from a testicle that had been twisted around to a woman who fell and cracked her head to a stab wound.
Wait.
What do you do when you twist a testicle?
Go back.
You go to the hospital and hope a doctor can untwist it.
How did it get twisted and around a woman? You lost me. I want to hear the full
pleasure.
story.
Is there a special wrench to turn your nuts back the other way?
Yeah, right. Honestly, it was just comforting the guy on the way to the hospital.
Do you just give him a little rub? How does the comforting go?
Yeah, that was another story.
So his nut was twisted around, just twisted?
How'd that happen?
So your nuts are hanging in there by a couple of cords and tubes or whatever. So,
but there's a wall.
I'm not exactly sure
between, right?
What he was doing that caused this testicular torsion, this turning, this twisting. But he managed to do it, and we took him in, and the doctor helped him out.
And that's painful?
There was some kinky shit going on.
Yeah.
Kinky shit going on.
Huh. Yeah, doing something he shouldn't have
because
been doing.
I've heard that you can have testicular torsion from all manner of things. Not just
somehow
somebody's just like twisting on your nuts or anything. But
well, isn't there like a little partition curtain in your ball sack that kind of keeps them apart?
I've never seen the inside of my
I don't know.
testicles.
I
Is there?
thought I read something online though. You know, I don't know.
Well, if
Google
you
it.
read it
Google.
on the internet, it's true.
Well, perhaps he was
Yeah,
doing
exactly.
something that tore the curtain, or
So
Maybe I was just curious about it, and I was like, oh, this kind of feels.
So what else? What else happened when you were in a paramedic? Like, what sticks out in your mind, or how did it affect your life? Like, what
Well,
did you
you know-
come away from it with? All
Assume that you
stuff.
see a lot of domestic violence cases. Like
Well,
you
that
were
was
saying,
part of it.
children with cigarette
that,
put out on them.
Yeah, that's a component of it that just.
You got to be mentally pretty tough.
And you realize that it's not going to stop. It's ongoing. It's every day. And then, you may live in a city of 250,000 people, but you're going to be involved with the 50 people or the 10 people that are having the worst possible day of their lives. And whether it's a dad who had a bad day at work and came home and kicked somebody's ass, or a car accident, or a woman who comes out of a restaurant who trips over one of the little curbs that stop a car and cracks her head and suddenly has a brain injury. I mean, and to a guy. So part of the experience was rotating through different departments. So, like, for example, I had to rotate through ICU. So I walk in through ICU, they say, hey, you're a big guy, we need your help. This guy won't take his medicine. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So what that means is I'm going to be holding a guy's head while they're going to try to stick a tube through the guy's nose, down the back of his throat, into his stomach so they can administer medicine, the medicine that he refuses to take. So I'm like, okay. So I'm grabbing this guy's head, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going to hold your head, and it's nothing personal, but you need to take your medicine. He's like, F you, and blah, blah, blah. He's going crazy. So I grab his head, they take this tube, they lube it up, they stick it in the left nostril, boom, bloody nose, blood everywhere, the guy's screaming, the nurse is like, okay, that didn't work.
So I'm guessing he's shaking his head back and forth, fighting the whole time.
And I'm struggling with him, trying to, I'm bringing in this giant fish, and I'm trying to hold it, whatever. So this
Right.
guy just doesn't want to cooperate. So I'm holding his head, even more still than I'm holding it before. They go for the right nostril, boom, same thing. It ends up exploding blood everywhere. The guy's screaming. He's like, fine, I'll take it. All it was, like orange juice comes in those little cups with the little metal lid on it that you sort of...
Yeah,
it was a little
aluminum
tiny
foil.
thing like that with aluminum foil. All you had to do was drink it. It already came pre-flavored for the guy. That's
Bubblegum,
all he had to do.
cherry.
So after having his nose blown out with these nasogastric tubes, he decided he was going to just drink it like a regular person and cooperate. But,
Give up. Yeah.
There was some mentally ill, there was something wrong there.
he was an alcoholic and didn't want to take medicine for what was going on with him. So, yeah, he was being obstinate. But that was part of the deal. Another time I was in ER doing a rotation, and there was a stab wound. And the doctor was like, hey, you want to feel this guy's descending aorta? I'm like, okay. He's like, stick your finger in the knife hole. So I'm going up with a gloved hand, sticking my finger in a stab wound in the guy's chest, feeling the heartbeat, which is like a centimeter away from my fingertip, in a hole in his chest.
So he almost died then because it was so close.
Yeah.
So where the blood is squirting out is what you're feeling
Almost.
for.
If it had hit the aorta or descending aorta, it would have been squirting out. But
It was
luckily,
that
it wasn't.
close.
It was that close. So yeah.
Wow.
So you don't feel a pulse any closer than
Right
a
there.
centimeter, basically, away from the
Yeah,
guy's
you might as well have had your finger
on his heart.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You must not have shaky hands then.
Well, you're in there to learn, and that kind of stuff doesn't bother me.
You could have made
so.
him pass out just like...
Yeah, push too hard. It's like,
Stop.
Even for me, like that's one reason I knew I could never be a doctor or a surgeon or anything is because I have shaky hands just in general. Like I can't hold them, and especially if I'm nervous or under pressure, under stress, like I'm
It's just the alcohol,
shaking.
dude.
All, I got
honestly, though, I
Parkinson's.
don't think the guy would have noticed. He had a stab wound, so my shaky finger wouldn't have been much to add to that.
Stop it now.
But like part of it too is like intubation. So you set up the tube that you basically set up in the lung, and it has a little inflatable bulb in it so that you can set a respirator up so the guy can actually breathe. So one of my rotations was surgery and setting up an intubation tube for a guy who was having half of his foot amputated because he had vesiculitis, which is this inflammation of his vascular system, which caused all of his toes to look like burnt pencils. I mean, if you take a pencil and you hold a lighter under it, the bone would be the graphite part of the pencil, and the tissue would be the burnt wood around it. I mean, it's a literal description.
Circulation anymore, and so that way the tissue just dies?
Exactly. So the vascular system becomes inflamed.